I'm Natalie. I head up partnerships and commercial for Platinum Property Partners. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a virtual discussion with Keith Dolby, put my teeth back in, from Matchpoint. Keith has worked alongside Platinum for many years, helping us find the right people for our franchise partner community. Also on that conversation was Andrew Milner. Andrew is a franchisee, or we call our franchisees franchise partners, based in Bristol. And Keith actually recruited Andrew. So we were having a conversation about the current climate, about potentially looking at period of uncertainty and what you could be doing during this time. And through that conversation, it was really interesting. So I thought, well, why not record it? So hopefully, potentially, you can take some value from the discussion, some potential hints and tips. So we'll kick off now. If it's okay with you, Andrew, I've got Andrew on the line and Keith. If you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you. If we start off with you, Andrew,
yeah,
a little bit about you and why you joined PPP, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thanks, Natalie. So, yes, Andrew Milner. What am I? 54 years old. I'm a chartered accountant by background, by training. And I first started talking to Keith when I left my previous employer. This was in kind of early 2018. And I was looking, as a lot of people do at that point, looking to decide what to do next. And I guess in the back of my mind, I felt that I probably wanted to go back into full-time employment. But I was also looking at what other options were available to me. So one of the key things for me was to kind of create a sustainable source of income that sat outside of any employment. And that was really the basis of the conversation that I had with Keith. So I'm married, got two children, a son who's 19, a daughter who's 15. So they're obviously moving into the next stage of their lives. And so that was also a consideration for us, is to find something that could be something that would be sustainable for them and for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And Keith, obviously I know who you are, but if you could just tell us a bit about you, that would be great.
Sure. My background is IT. When I left school, I became a computer programmer. Did that for many years, ended up working for a small software company, which grew quite rapidly during the 80s and 90s. You know, there was a big boom in software. And by 2002, I was actually the managing director and a shareholder of the company. And I ran it for the next 5 years, whilst the primary owner, the major shareholder, played golf. And at the end of that 5 years, we've made more money than the company had made in the previous 25 years. It just much better at running his company than he was, even though I said so. And he didn't like having to give me 25% of the profit, so he forced me to sell my 25% back to him. He had to pay me quite a tidy sum for it. And I left, and I knew when I left I would never ever work for somebody again. And one of my colleagues, good friend of mine, said, well, you took an established business model and you perfected it, you made it better. You should look at buying a franchise. I didn't know anything about franchising at the time. I just thought it was all McDonald's and KFC. So I did some research. I found a company in the US called Matchpoint that coaches and advises people. I'm the sort of person who likes to use experts. You know, so, if I'm not well, obviously I go and see the doctor. If I need my accounts doing at the end of the year, I pay an accountant to do it. I like taking professional advice rather than trying to do it all myself. So I asked them if they were operating in the UK, and they said no, but we're looking for the first person to set up in the UK. We'll teach you all about franchising. We'll show you how to do due diligence on franchises. And whilst you're learning all of that, you can be finding clients that you can be passing that knowledge on to. And I did it with a view to doing it for maybe 3 or 4 years whilst I found the perfect franchise for me. And I did find the perfect franchise for me in 2011, but at that time, by that time, I was enjoying what I did with Matchpoint, and I thought, well, I'll carry on. And I've now been doing it, well, this is my 13th year being a franchise advisor.
Wow. So what is a franchise advisor, broker, just for clarity, what's your role involved?
It's a bit like a recruitment agent on steroids is probably the best thing to say. In the same way that an employer will go to a recruitment agency and say, these are the people I'm looking for. And then if that recruiter finds that person, the employer pays them for having found the new employee. It's exactly the same. Franchisors come to me and say, these are the types of individuals that tend to do well in our franchise. It could be the background industries they come from. It could be the roles they've held within the organizations they've worked for. Their transferable skills, basically. You know, what is it that they could use in pretty much any industry? I'm then sort of making the match and suggesting to them, you should look at this franchise and this franchise and this franchise because they're looking for people like you. But I then coach them through the whole process of researching the franchise. I tell them what sort of questions they should be asking. I tell them the pros and cons, what questions to ask and what answers to listen for, because franchising is an unregulated industry in the UK, and unfortunately it does mean there are some franchises out there that aren't that great. So I give them questions to ask and then tell them what answers to listen for, and say, well, these are the good answers and these are the bad answers that might sound good, but they're really avoiding answering the question you've asked. So it's designed to get people to feel comfortable enough that they haven't missed something in their research, because obviously there's a financial investment here. And a lot of people will look at a franchise but won't make the commitment to buy it because they're worried they've missed something in their research that they'll uncover once they've made the investment. So my role is really to make sure they leave no stone unturned, and therefore when they make the decision to buy that franchise, they're confident that it is the correct decision for them.
Okay, so how many franchisors do you actually act for, Keith?
Well, there's about 1,000 different franchise. There's about 1,000 different franchise models in the UK at the moment. As I said, it is an unregulated industry. So it does frankly mean there are some poor franchises out there. They're not very good business models. Those people aren't going to ask me to represent them because they know that when I show my candidates how to do their due diligence, it's going to unearth that this franchise is not as good as it's being made to sound. So it just tends to be the better franchises, and there's, I personally work with about 300 different franchises in the UK, and they're the brands that are all comfortable that when I say you must ask this question, you must ask that question, they've got a good, solid, strong answer for it because their business model genuinely does work.
That's really interesting. So that's a lot of different franchises that you work for, and obviously you are impartial. So you place people with what you think will work for them.
Yes, and my reputation is what drives my business. So Andrew came to me through an ex-colleague of his. I placed one of his colleagues into a franchise, completely different franchise to PPP, and he was happy enough with his experience of that to recommend me to Andrew. Andrew then came to me. He had a completely different set of requirements to his colleague in terms of what he was looking for in a franchise, which is why I ended up recommending Platinum to him, rather than the same franchise as his colleague had gone into. So it's not just about what your skill sets are, it's also about what are you looking to achieve in business.
Okay, that's really interesting. So when people are considering franchising, what do you think the differences are doing it by yourself or using you, and what do you cost, Keith? I actually know the answer to this question, but does it cost to use your services? It makes sense, for your expertise. How does that all work?
Just like a recruitment agency, again, it's the franchisor that pays me for finding them the candidate, in the same way as the employer pays the recruitment agency. So it doesn't cost people who come to me and say, can you find me a franchise? It doesn't cost them anything to work with me at all, in exactly the same way as it doesn't cost you anything to send your CV off to a recruiter. It's all at the other end. And there's a very simple reason for that. Franchisors tend to have more money than franchisees, so they can afford to pay me a lot better than a franchisee could. And that's exactly why the recruitment agency works in the way it does. The employer is the person with all the money who can afford to pay a nice big finder's fee. Okay,
that makes sense, total sense. So talk me through your process with a new candidate. And Andrew, if you remember any of Keith's process when he was probing you to narrow down your search.
Yeah, I mean, normally I'll get an inquiry coming online saying, I'm interested, can you help me? I'll call that person up, I'll explain the process, I take them through and see if they're interested. If they are, I send them a questionnaire. It's a bit of a background questionnaire, asked a few things about their skill sets, their strengths, the things they like doing. Also, their weaknesses and the things they wouldn't be any good at, because it's very important that if you join a franchise, you don't have to do lots of something that you actually hate doing and aren't any good at. I flesh out their ideas around what sort of industries they think they might be interested in. I get them to give me a financial statement so that I can talk to them about realistically what could you invest, what would the banks think if you wanted to go to them and approach them for some funding. Once I've done that questionnaire, I'll do a consultation with them. It's over the telephone. It lasts a couple of hours. The reason it lasts a couple of hours is because it takes a long time to dig deep enough to find out what I need. But also, a lot of people aren't that serious about buying a franchise. And if I tell them they're going to have to give me 2 hours of their time on the telephone, that normally sifts the wheat from the chaff, and they'll find excuses not to have that conversation with me. Once we've done that conversation, I'll then narrow it down which brands are looking for someone like you, and then out of that, who's got something that I think will tick the boxes you're looking to tick, because that is part of what I ask. You know, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? You know, do you want to be part-time, full-time? Do you want to have staff? Are you looking for something that you can sell at the end of all of this? Yeah, all sorts of questions like that. So I'll whittle it down to what I think are suitable franchises. I'll talk to the franchisors involved to see if this person does indeed sound like somebody they'd like to have a chat with. I do territory checks to make sure they've got territory available. And good franchises have all the demographics on their territories, you know, average age, population density, average income, number of businesses in each industry sector. So they'll be able to tell me whether that is a valid territory for their business, whether enough clients. I then go back and explain what I've come up with to my candidate, and providing they're comfortable with at least one of those brands, they can pick as many from what I come up with as they like. We then put them into due diligence, which is where they start going through your process of them assessing your brand and you assessing them to see if you think they're suitable. And I just talk them through the whole process. I usually speak to them about once a week just to understand where have you got to, what you still need to find out, remind them which questions they need to have asked, and ask them, have they asked that now, and what answers did they get? Just to try and keep them moving forward and gaining confidence that what they're doing is the right thing. And as I say, ultimately at the end of that, if they go on to invest in that franchisor will pay me a finder's fee for having found them. But there's no obligation. They don't have to buy a franchise that I put in front of them. They can look at other franchises as well. They're not limited to just the ones that I come up with. Yeah, so I've done this for a few years now, so I tend to back myself to be able to find something more appealing than somebody who's probably a novice in franchise research is going to find for themselves.
Yeah, agreed. Do you remember, obviously it was a couple of years ago now, Andrew, do you remember through that process with Keith?
I do. I remember it being what I would describe as fairly structured. You know, as Keith said, he's done this, you know, for a number of years. So I think he's developed a very clear, structured process to help you identify what it is that you want to do. You know, in my case, I've been with the same employer for pretty much, 28 years. So I'd never really had to think about what I would do outside of that. And so there's a big onus on you as an individual to try to understand what it is is out there that you want to do next. And Keith certainly helped me kind of think through what was important to me at that point, and what's important to me will be different to what's important to somebody else. It's also time specific. So what was important to me 2 years ago might be different now. So I think it's very helpful and very important actually to go through that sort of sifting process to help you think through what it is you want to do next. And as Keith said, it might be that there's a list of franchises that are put in front of you and actually none of them are quite right for you at that point in time. But just having gone through the process was I certainly found very helpful.
Oh, that's really good. Good feedback then, Keith. That was good.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. So this is an interesting one. What do you think, both of you actually? I'll start off with you, Keith. What are the key traits of a successful franchisee? What do you look for, and what things do you look out for during your process? Any kind of...
Yeah, it's their transferable skills. So some franchisors will say to me, our best franchisees all come from a sales and marketing background. So it's probably a franchise where you've got to be pretty good at selling a concept to your potential customer. so that they will then buy in and become your customer. Others will say to me, management experience is essential because maybe it's a staff-based model. Some will say account management because maybe it's fairly easy to get customers, but how long they stay with you and how frequently they use whatever it is you provide depends on the level of customer service that you're going to provide them with. So I basically get a people profile from every franchisor that I work with that tells me what to look for. And it's usually the transferable skills. Most franchisors don't like people with industry experience. So for example, the recruitment franchises don't like taking on people from a recruitment background. And the reason is they're worried that if you've got industry knowledge, you'll say, I know how to do this, and you'll do it your way rather than the way they want you to do it. If you come into the industry with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever, well, the only thing you can do is do exactly what your franchisor tells you to do because you don't know any better. So successful traits of a franchisee, having no industry knowledge is probably amongst the highest, as well as all those other ones I mentioned.
That's a surprise, but makes sense. What about you, Andrew? What do you think? So as a husband and wife team, you and Sam, what do you think are your key strengths for your, obviously you're successful, you're building up a fantastic portfolio. What do you think that you've brought to the table that's helped you with that as a team?
So I think for me, it's really comes back to why you're doing it in the first place. What's the motivation for moving into something that, by definition, is slightly different to what you've done previously? Because whatever you move into, you know, if you haven't done it before, there will be ups and downs, and therefore you need to make sure that the reason you're doing it is very very strong and you know, gives you the motivation to keep moving through. I think for me, I'm an engineer by university training and then an accountant. So the practical application of things is something that attracts me. My wife's a pharmacist, so I guess we've both got a science trait rather than a sales and marketing trait. So that sort of points you in a certain direction. In our case, we'd also done a bit of property investment before, so we sort of knew a little bit, but certainly not enough to go and do this the platinum process by ourselves. And for us, it wasn't about doing something that was full time. You know, we both have employed jobs already. We want to carry on doing those employed jobs, and so this was a way of diversifying our income streams, but we didn't want something that would take, you know, huge amounts of time all the time. So it was about finding, you know, I come back to why you're doing it, what is it that you're interested in, what's the motivation, and then finding something that fits your ambitions, your lifestyle, the time commitment, all of those things. And I think that's where Keith's knowledge of the franchise sector as a whole, you know, is invaluable, because he's seen so many different people with so many different skills and backgrounds, so many different ambitions and desires, and has the ability to kind of fit you into the existing marketplace, if you like.
Absolutely. And how do you, so you mentioned you're both working, how do you balance that? So running a property, running a franchise, and both working with not little children, but still teenagers, which can sometimes be just as challenging.
Yes.
How do you get that balance? So
I think for us, the key is leveraging the time of other people. So we pay a cleaner, we pay a caretaker. You know, we use the power team that Platinum has identified to help us with initial purchases and buying and refurbishing. So it's you know, clearly we are involved. We you know, we have to do things in the evenings and weekends, but by and large, where there's something that we can outsource, you know, that's what we try and do. So we're getting the benefit of some understanding and some education and knowledge and learning, whilst we're also using the skills of other people to do what they do best.
Right. Bit of a topical question now. So in terms of franchising, Keith and Andrew, COVID-19. So what do you think in terms of the franchising world? What kind of impact will that have on franchising in the UK? Keith, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's bad news for franchising, or what do you think?
I think right now it's causing a problem. Yeah, people aren't going to be confident starting a new business while we're in the middle of not being allowed to go out very often. I mean, how do you go and talk to potential customers and that sort of thing? But I think it will actually boom once this is over. And my thinking behind this is we keep hearing on the news about companies that are laying off lots of people. And Rolls-Royce said 9,000 a few days ago. I think British Airways have talked about 12,000.
Yeah.
A chunk of those people who are going to be laid off are probably going to be in their 40s and 50s, probably been in that industry all of their life, probably risen to fairly senior positions. And that industry is going to contract and be a smaller industry for a few years to come at least. So the chances of them then getting another role within their industry are going to be few and far between. So I think people who've maybe been thinking about starting a business but never been able to quite wrench themselves away from that PAYE check each month are now having that PAYE check taken away from them, and effectively being forced down the route where they're saying, okay, I haven't got a choice now, I've got to do something for myself. So I think there will be a lot of middle and senior management people coming from an industry where they've lost their job, the industry's contracting, who are thinking, I can't have a job in this industry anymore, it's time I did something for myself. And if they're people like me who like to take expert advice from others rather than trying to do everything on their own, they'll look down the franchising route.
Yeah, I think we saw that ourselves back in 2008 with the global financial crisis. It was, a quiet period. Obviously, property is a bit different. There's a window where you can actually take advantage in a way of the drop in markets. It's not always the best time to go into a market when it's buoyant and and thriving. Sometimes it's good when the market is dropping. But so we did see back then that yes, we were quiet for a period, but then we were very, very busy. So I think as a business, we feel quite similar, actually, Keith. I think there's going to be more people looking, probably more time spent at home, sat at your desk, working from home, uncertain periods of if I have a job to go back to. And sometimes this can actually make you think maybe it's time for a change. Maybe I don't want to be driving into work, doing 2-hour commutes each way and not seeing my children. Maybe it's time to carve out a new path, and this has given people that thinking time and that clarity to make that decision. So I think that's what I'm hearing on the phones when speaking to new people at the moment. Now is obviously not a great time, but definitely wanting to keep in touch for looking at the next few months as to what's going to be happening within the UK. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, it reminds me of the very same thoughts that were going through my mind when I left my employer. And whilst I've been with them for 28 years, the last 15 of those I'd been in London. So I've been doing a weekly commute for a long period of time. And so it was a chance for me to reassess whether that was something I wanted to carry on doing. So I think it's very similar to maybe what people are experiencing at the moment, that they can't go out, they can't, in many cases people will be furloughed. Inevitably you start thinking about, do I want to go back to the employment that I had only a few weeks ago? It's a chance to reassess what you want out of the day job, if you like. And in my case, it was, I'd quite like to be at home a bit more, quite like to have a bit more control, quite like to start to generate more income from different sources, so diversify our income streams, create income streams that would survive my employment. So, can we start to create assets that we own? Nobody can take those assets away from us. They will generate income, not just for us, but for our children as well. So it was a chance to kind of reevaluate what we wanted and create something that was different.
That's great. So part of obviously now is a time, I suppose one thing we do have more of is a bit of time actually, Keith, at home. I don't, not with 2 children at 7 and 3, working full time with a husband to look after as well. I shouldn't really say that probably, but I have. Not much time for me, but I know a lot of people I'm speaking to on the phone, you have times to do research and even doing training and things like that. As part of our due diligence as a franchise, we create a 10-year business plan for our prospective new partners. That business plan is now being adapted to a COVID-19 10-year business plan, working out how the impact of what's happening now over the next couple of years may impact that business at the early stages. But, you know, as a business, it takes time to build up and generate income when you're buying property. There's a book recommendation which I'm going to send out afterwards by Seth Godin called The Dip. So when partners join, I don't know whether you felt this, Keith, Andrew, that you join, you pay a franchise fee, then you're paying the builders, then you've got all of this cash going out of the business, you're seeing absolutely zilch coming back to you until that first house is filled, and then you see, obviously, you come out of the dip. So as a franchise, we really try and help coach people through that period, so it's not a shock. But I'm just interested to know, obviously, we're not here today just to talk about Platinum, but Keith, how do you coach people through that in terms of what they should be expecting from an income perspective? You know, with all of the different other franchises that you act for, is that something as part of your process do you discuss? I'll come to you, Andrew, afterwards, just so you can justify and let me know the horrible feelings of all that money first joined. So Keith, is that something that you do?
Yes, it is something I do. I think it's something that people are often a little bit naive about. They sort of see buying a franchise almost as like investing in an ISA. You put your money in on day one, and by day two, you're starting to see it's worth more than it was when you put it in. So it's not like that. Part of what I get franchises to tell me is roughly how long is it going to take to get your first customer, roughly what sort of income could you expect to build by I typically say the end of year 3. And then I think years 1 and 2 are stepping stones on the way to that. It will vary from franchise to franchise, but maybe whatever you want to earn, you'll earn a quarter of that in the first year, maybe half to 2/3 in the second year, and it'll be the third year where you actually hit the sweet spot. And yes, working capital, a lot of people don't realize that you actually need more than just the franchise fee. There's 3 figures to think about when you're buying a franchise. Firstly, the initial outlay, the franchise fee, which is going to buy you the intellectual property and pay for your training and support. Then there's the working capital. How much is it going to cost me to run my business each month? And how many months is it going to take before the business is likely to be earning at least as much as it's costing to run? So you've now hit break even. And how many more months after that until it's now earning so much more than it's costing to run that you've actually got enough of a surplus to call it a salary? And until you get to that point, how are you going to cover your cost of living? That's the third number you think about. You've still got to pay the mortgage or the rent. You've still got to put food on the table. And it varies from franchise to franchise. Typically, anything between about 3 months and 2 years is the time that it will take, depending on the business model, to get to the point where you can pay yourself enough of a salary to cover your cost of living. And therefore, some franchises need large chunks of working capital because you've got to be covering your own costs of living for maybe the first 18 to 24 months. So yes, I go through all of that with people in a lot of detail and make sure that they know what the total cost is going to be to them, not just what the franchise fee is. And can they get that money together? The banks like franchising. They will often come up with as much as 70% of the total investment, not just the franchise fee, but the working capital and the cost of living as well, providing you can come up with the other 30%. And providing you can put up some security against that loan if it's a sizable loan. So yeah, I spend a lot of time working with them to make sure that from a numbers point of view, they really know what they're doing. Also, just to pick up on what you said about a 10-year business plan, if a franchisor does not require you to produce a business plan, I usually say to people, walk away. Don't go anywhere near that franchise. There must be a business plan where the franchisor is effectively signing off on it and saying, yes, if you do all the things you've said you're going to do in your business plan, the numbers you've said you want to earn out of this are achievable. Some franchisors give cash flow forecasts, and what I say to people about that is, if I watch the weather in the morning and the weatherman says it's not going to rain today, and I go out and get caught in a shower, I can't sue him for getting me wet because it was just a forecast. It was not a guarantee. Business plans are an absolute necessity. Don't take any notice of cash flow forecasts. It should be about you producing a business plan, and if the franchisor doesn't require it, then that's a red flag to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's fundamental, really, to the success of any business is to have a firm plan in place. That's for sure. So, Andrew, do you remember that period when you first joined, all that capital going out?
Oh, definitely. Well, we're currently in the middle of, or towards the end of refurbishing our second property, so we're experiencing it all over again. But I guess, in our case, we are still employed, so we do still have the luxury of the monthly PAYE check still coming in. But inevitably, when you're buying and refurbishing a property in the way that we did, you are spending a fair amount of money, on that, and you've always got that feeling that you need to make sure that it's going to be tenanted at the end, because clearly, if you can't tenant at the right sort of levels, then you won't earn the right levels of return. So, Platinum was very, very careful to hold our hand through that process. Obviously, there's a number of different mentors that you use who are very experienced in their respective fields around buying and refurbishing, and so that was really one of the key things for me, was the level of support, the level of day-to-day advice that was available, that made sure that when we decided that we were going to buy a house and how we were going to refurbish it, that those things were all you can't take the decisions for us, but the advice was there that based on many years of experience of doing these things. And I guess the other thing with Platinum is the ongoing support, because anybody who's aware of the property market will know that regulations are changing all the time, and particularly at the moment, it's obviously a difficult time for tenants. So part of the support we get is to help us deal with all of the regulations and the changing circumstances in the market.
That's really good to hear. Support is, as a business, we, for the past, during COVID-19, recruitment of new partners has not been on the agenda. It has been supporting our existing partner network through this period of uncertainty. But obviously, I don't know if you both know, I'm sure you know, Andrew, you probably know too, Keith, the property market the government has reopened it. Certainly not back to normal. It's not business as usual, but the wheels are turning, so things are happening. So we've taken our recruitment process online, virtually. So we're holding now virtual discovery days where people can find out more and do research. Keith, from your perspective, do you think now is a good time to be carrying out research if you're looking at setting up your own business or looking or exploring a number of different franchises? Is now the time to be researching from the comfort of your own home?
Yes, it is. I normally say to people, it'll take you about 3 to 6 months to fully research a franchise to the point where you are comfortable enough that you know everything, that you haven't come across any red flags, and you're prepared to invest. And now is a good time to do that because we've got a lot more time on our hands. A lot of the research into a franchise can be done over the telephone or via video conferencing or internet research. When franchisors map out their territories in the UK, they tend to do it using the figures from the last census. And the last census in the UK was in 2011. So those figures are now 9 years out of date. So when you're talking to a franchisor, they'll often give you jobs to do in terms of doing some research online. Has the population of your area changed significantly? Has the demographic changed in any way? That's all stuff you can be doing now. You mentioned virtual discovery days. I think a lot of franchisors have gone to doing virtual discovery days instead of the physical face-to-face meeting. You can talk to existing franchisees on the telephone now as well. So you can do most of your research so that when we are allowed to move around freely, there should just be two things left to do. One is to go and on a physical discovery day. Virtual discovery days are fine, but they should not be instead of physical discovery days. They should be as well as. If your franchisor doesn't require to meet you face to face before you join the franchise, again, that's a red flag. Walk away. They've got to interview and assess you to see if you are a suitable person for their network. If they don't want to do that or don't feel it's necessary, then it means they don't really care who they're signing up, and that's a risk. You don't want to take that risk. And most good franchisors will want you to spend some time with existing franchisees, go and shadow them for a day to see what a day in their life is like. So again, if a franchisor doesn't give you access to their existing franchisees, that's another red flag that should make you walk away. So yes, you can do probably 90% of your research now from the comfort of your own home. Telephone calls with franchisors, reading literature, doing some online research. So you just have a physical discovery day and a meeting with some franchisees when we are finally able to start moving around again.
Absolutely. We as a franchise, we have to meet our new partners, and I suppose moving on from that, it's really important that not only do we meet our new partners, we want to meet their partners, so their other halves or whoever's in their family that will be there supporting them. So from your side, Keith, that to us is fundamental, because you're there working together on a business for a minimum of 7 years. So and it's important that you have that synergy. The last thing we want to do as a franchisor is be mediating between two husband and wife or partners. So from your perspective, how important is it to have buy-in from significant other?
It's essential, and I've witnessed this many times over the years. Somebody who has taken voluntary redundancy because he or she has found a franchise that they want to buy into. If they need bank funding for it, that's often secured against the property. And I had this happen just over a year ago now. Guy resigned from his job, he took his voluntary redundancy, didn't give him enough money to comfortably get through the first 12 months of his franchise. He was a little bit tight, so he applied for a bank loan. Now, most people, if they're married, both their names are on the deeds of the house. So when the loan application came through, his wife had to sign as well as him. She'd not done any of the due diligence. She hadn't been on the journey with him. She hadn't met the people that he'd met. She hadn't had the conversations that he'd had. She hadn't built any of the security about this business model that he had. And she point blank refused to sign the documents to get the loan. And as a result, he'd now quit his job. He's now unemployed. And from what I last heard, he's gone back into the industry, an industry which he told me he now hates, in a lower paid position than he was, simply because his wife did not go on the journey with him. And I know some franchisors that will not allow a franchisee to sign up unless they have at least had a conversation with the partner, even if that partner hasn't been on the discovery day. Also, taking your partner on the journey with you is another way of assessing the quality of the franchisor. A good franchisor, if you say, can I bring my partner on a discovery day, will say, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to meet them. Weaker franchisors just see that as somebody else they've got to sell the concept to. So they're far more likely to say, oh, our meeting room's not big enough for you to bring guests with you, or something like that. So always ask if you can take your partner, even if you're not going to, and see what the response is. But yes, you should, wherever possible, take your partner with you, because that person can say, no, I'm not comfortable with you doing this. And they're far more likely to do that if they haven't got the same level of comfort that you have by following you on the journey.
Yeah. I think it's the psychology, isn't it? It's if you're talked through and guided through the decisions you're making with somebody, then it's fine. In the end, it feels like it is a joint decision. But if that's taken away from you, you can say no to something even if you think it's the right thing, because you've not been consulted. So that's just human nature, that you want that, and it's important that you're both on the same page, really.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also sign of commitment. You know, it's not easy, particularly if one of you or both of you are working for you to attend a Discovery Day. And in the nicest possible way, I felt that we were being interviewed as well. You know, it wasn't just a one-way process. And I think part of that is because one of the key things that Platinum is looking for anyway is a group of franchise partners who will help each other. It's not just about the business that you create, it's about you helping others do the same through the things that you've learned. And in fact, this week we've got somebody who lives in Bristol as we do and is interested to see our HMO that's being refurbished, wants to understand, you know, what we've done and how we've done it. And so, you know, that's part and parcel of the strength of the network is the education that you can then share with others.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, the network is one of the key areas that you can't really promote until you've joined. You meet those people in your areas that are there to help, and everybody has to join knowing that they have to have the hand up, hand down mentality. So when you join and you need more help, then you've got it. But also when you've got to a point now, you've done a full refurb, and if somebody new comes on, then it may not be yes today, you can come and see me now. It might be, well, I would say you're not going on holiday anywhere time soon, but you never know. But I know I've taken up a lot of both of your times today. I just really appreciate speaking with you both. I suppose the message really for anyone listening is, if you have any interest in franchising, not only Platinum, whether it's logistics or the care industry or working with children in education, or any of the 150 franchises that Keith promotes, we can send you details for Keith for you to have that impartial call, and you can have a free consultation with him. But even so, if you want to then pick up due diligence with Platinum, feel free, you can speak with me, you can also speak with Keith. He understands the business and he sits outside of PPP, so sometimes it's nice to speak to somebody different. So I really appreciate your time, Keith. Thank you for today.
You're welcome.
And thanks, Andrew.
That's right.
Have a good rest of your day, and hope we'll speak soon. And I'm sure there'll be people that want to speak to you, Keith, very soon.
More than happy to speak to anybody who would like to have a chat.
Lovely. Thank you both so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Natalie.